I would say the biggest thing that I learned at Stripe, and I think is absolutely a will be forever durable lesson about building companies. Stripe had a culture that was basically every person at Stripe is the best person to ever do that job. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's like,
Hey, I'm Vishesh, your host. I'm a 5x founder and CTO. Still building. I also help founders like you ship faster and fix what's slowing you down. More at vishesh.space.
I'm joined by Scott Persinger, co-founder and CTO of BizTrip AI, a company focused on utilizing AI technology to enhance corporate travel management. Join us as Scott unfolds his journey from software engineering at major firms, including Stripe, to pioneering AI in travel, making it smarter and more personalized.
the travel is not your job. Your job is something else. The travel is just like facilitating you to go and do this job. So all the time that you spend traveling en route, planning for where you're going, managing your hotel reservation, all that is like basically wasted time, or it's like falling on me as like an individual, or it's just taking away from the time for me to do my job. And so the more that the system can help offload more and more of that, time, just means I'm going to be more effective at the actual job that someone's paying me to do.
Hey, hi Scott. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. So BizTrip AI, what was the aha moment? How did you guys start and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so BizTrip AI is bringing AI technology to corporate travel, and we're building a suite of AI agents to make planning and managing corporate travel much more intelligent, much easier for corporate travelers. So I think the aha moment for the company, so my partner, Tom Romery, has been thinking about this idea of a computer travel assistant for a long time. And actually, his last startup was like, well, it was called Your Amazing Personal Travel Assistant. But he felt like the technology at that time just wasn't ready to really deliver on that promise. Meanwhile, I started getting into AI and AI agents like the end of 2023. So I've been sort of like building around sort of agents of, almost as long as sort of the technology has been around. And I was really excited about it from a technologist standpoint, but also very much like, I'm not sure what is the right business problem to try to solve with this technology. So I'd known Tom for a long time, and earlier this year, he came to me and said, hey, I think we can use AI to build this personal travel assistant, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And so when he and I started talking, I really felt like, oh, wow, this is really an amazing applied application of this agentic AI technology that I've been working on. And so that was really the aha moment for me, was just like, I travel for work, I travel, personally, everybody travels. And I could just see very tangibly this idea of like, oh yeah, I really want a personal travel assistant that understands my travel preferences and where I'm going and I get there and can help me out. And then if you just look at the travel industry itself, it's so stuck in these legacy applications, this deep legacy travel stack.
Yeah.
It just felt like, wow, there's a great opportunity to really build something great and that would be meaningful to a lot of travelers.
A lot of travel AI startups I have come across choose B2C. How and when did you guys choose B2B? And what are the set of challenges that are different?
Yeah, for sure. I think from the building of AI technology, AI applications, the B2C makes a lot of sense. Like consumers are rapidly adopting AI tools and technology, and it's just kind of easier to convince that one person to adopt your thing and to use it. The problem, of course, in travel is that consumer travel is a really tough space. The big guys spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year acquiring customers and battling it out for kind of customer acquisition. And so trying to play in that space as a consumer startup, I think is really, really tough. On the enterprise side, you have kind of this inverse problem where selling to a single corporation is quite difficult. They have very high requirements, and they really need to trust you as an organization. And it's quite difficult to get a larger company to trust your early stage startup with something as important as the travel of their employees. But if you can crack that nut and make that sale, you potentially unlock hundreds or thousands of travelers with a single sale. And so that, I think, is a huge advantage for us, especially because the whole game is to get real usage and real data and to be able to train and improve your agentic solution in conjunction with real usage. And my sense is that the folks on the consumer side are going to have this struggle of, you might get people to come and kick the tires, but are they going to really come and book a lot of travel with your, with your agentic solution? Like, and at what point are they going to start doing that? And until they get through the whole life cycle and you really capture them as a customer, can you really expect to train and improve your, solution in that kind of virtuous cycle of the iterative loop with your customers? Where we found on the enterprise side, okay, it's tough work to convince that customer to trust us, but then once we do, we unlock a set of travelers who are going to be, the corporation and those travelers are committed to working with us to deploy the solution. And now we can really build and iterate. So fortunately, my co-founder, Tom Romery, has a deep background in the corporate travel space. He knows lots of the companies, lots of the travel managers who work in that space, and they trust him because he's been around and because he's built startups and technology in that space before. So that's just an unfair advantage by virtue of our founding team that I think gives us a way to get into the enterprise space.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, makes sense. How many times are consumers going to go on a vacation? Maybe 3 times a year. Uh, what are some of the initial challenges you faced when integrating AI? You said there are a lot of legacy players. What sort of challenges have you?
Yeah, so the travel tech stack is this deep, deep, deep legacy stack. I mean, travel was one of the first industries to really embrace kind of computerization, right? But we're talking like in the 60s and very, very successfully so. Like those early systems really powered the expansion of global travel. A lot of those same systems are still in place today. And so I joke with my engineering team that like we're building on the deepest tech stack anybody's ever built. We're at like state of the art agentic AI at the top, all the way down to like COBOL code from the 60s, at the bottom. And so building that, kind of carefully curating how you kind of manage the data transformation and the integrations all the way up that stack is a very tricky problem. So when we first built our agentic solution, we kind of like took an agent, we connected it directly to this kind of like traditional kind of travel management platform. Well, there's 150 flights between Boston and Newark every day. Every one of those flights has hundreds of attributes to it. It's just too much data and too complex a data model to just feed it en masse, even to like modern frontier LLM. So like the first version of our agent just struggled. It was just too much data. It couldn't really make intelligent recommendations or decisions. So what we realized was we needed an intermediate layer. And that was sort of the genesis of this thing we called the BizTrip Travel Brain, which is this idea of a layer which brings together inventory, historical travel data. It brings together traveler preferences and predictive analytics, kind of cleans and correlates all this data, and then provides just the right data into the agent context at the time, per task of what the agent is trying to do. And so that is really like the secret to how you get an agent that appears to make good recommendations and appears to be intelligent is by carefully curating, giving it the clean, right, actionable data at the time that it's trying to make a decision.
Yeah, makes sense. And so it's like, are you storing all that data or real time? Like, are you caching all that data or is this coming from a bunch of third-party partnerships?
Yeah, so we have partnerships with different providers of travel inventory. Then we have our own kind of data warehouse, which is primarily seeded with the historical travel and expense data from our corporate customer. It also has traveler profiles, right? So we have kind of like this, that's sort of like the whole key is this data layer that brings these different data sources together. Some information is cached, some information is stored, long term, and it's about cleaning and correlating that data, and then a bunch of, agent functions that give the agents access to the data at the right time.
You come from an engineering background. You've been developing software for a while. What's your current stack? Do you code as a CTO, and what's your current stack?
Yeah,
How are
so
things?
I was like managing a 100% engineering team up until about a couple of years ago. But as the AI wave was really growing and clearly just like this huge transformation was coming, I wanted to be involved. I wanted to like be on the front line. I was like, oh,
Right.
I got to be like part of this revolution, this transformation, because it's too exciting to kind of be sort of adjacent to it. But I also wanted to get my feet on the ground. I felt like, okay, I really need to go back to programming and working with these LLMs and understanding how they work sort of at ground level. I don't think you can really do it very well if you kind of stay at management level and you're letting the other people like work with the LLMs. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the last, I spent the first year sort of like tinkering with the technology, trying to understand, building things. I had kind of like a research lab of my own. We were working with some corporate clients, building sort of some early agent solutions for them. And so nowadays I have my team and they're mostly the ones who are, building and writing the code. I still do some coding because I want to stay close to the problem and I want to understand how things are really working. I also want to understand the tools. So I've been using Cursor, have adopted that as kind of like my primary coding tool. And I'd say that's pretty popular with the team, but I use Claude Code as well.
Mm.
Some of the team members are using Codex. And so it's all a virtuous cycle now, right? Of like, you use Claude Code and you can see, oh, I see how they built this orchestrator agent and these multiple sub agents that go off and do particular things. And it maintains a to-do list of what it's trying to do, right? And like all that kind of loop. So being able to see that stuff live, it's just like very, very obvious, like, oh, right, we need to transfer a lot of this to the way our travel agent is going to work.
Yeah, everybody's learning from each other. I think it's so new. Yeah, makes sense. I started with Cursor as well, and I really liked it. And then I think 3 months ago they had this like massive blip in terms of quality. I think they were trying to cost control. That's when I
Mm.
switched to Claude Code, and I think Claude recently has had some hiccups as well.
Yeah.
Seems like everybody's trying to manage costs, but now I think stabilizing a little bit. I'm a big Claude fan. Claude
Yeah,
Code.
it's a moving target. So we've been playing with Browser Use, which is one of the web browser automation tools that are out there, mostly to build like end-to-end integration tests because we have an AI agent too. And so when we first started looking at integration testing, it was like, well, our application is non-deterministic and does not always return the same
Same results.
conversation path. And so how are we going to build like an automated, test for this? Well, it seems to make sense to use an LLM that can drive the other side of the conversation. Anyway, what I really like their product and what I think is really interesting about what they're doing is that they've fine-tuned their own model now, which they host and run. And so, yeah, I can use Browser Use, I can connect it to Claude, or I can connect it to GPT with my own, API key, but I can also just use their model. And they've tuned it for the purpose. It's priced more cheaply than those other frontier models, are priced. And so I think that's a really interesting like use case slash business model of where you understand, oh, we have a more specific domain. We don't have to be good at every possible task and challenge like a Claude or a ChatGPT needs to be. And now the open source models are so good that we can take one of those and fine tune it for our agentic use case and actually charge people directly for the model.
Interesting. And are you guys going that route as well? Are you?
It's still too early. We're plugging in different, frontier models. We've experimented with some of the open source models. And so I think it's an open question of whether we kind of go just down a little bit in the stack. But I do like, people worry about, the cost of inference, right? And
Sure.
if I was Cursor, like you say, if I was Cursor and I had a bunch of users who were using my product for hours and hours every day, right? Or Lovable, even more so, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
go build me a website, spend 20 minutes, burning tokens, and then come back with the result. I would be like, yeah, really worried about how much money I'm spending on OpenAI tokens and thinking, okay, how do I get my inference costs down? Travel is a bit of a different thing because it's like we're driving towards a transaction, purchasing flights or hotels, and that's a super high value transaction and one that even an active user, right, they might plan 2 trips in a month, maybe 3 trips, right? And so we don't really expect that our customers are going to be spending hours and hours a day in like an inference loop with our agents. So I'm not sure that the token costs that we'll pay, like I think they will be relatively small compared to our revenue. And so we won't have to necessarily provide our own model.
Makes sense. Switching gears, you mentioned in one of your posts about not replacing junior developers using AI. You are clearly a young team right now. How has your hiring strategy changed based on AI? And what do you mean by that post? Like, what's your outlook towards hiring junior engineers?
Yeah, so this was something I heard from somebody, who's running another he was running another startup. And he told me, oh
Mm,
yeah, we don't even hire junior devs anymore because the AI can write all that code. And
right.
so we're only hiring seniors, and those seniors are 5x more productive because the AIs are out there, writing all the code that the junior, devs used to write. To me, it's, I just think it's like a total misunderstanding of the way the tools work, the way software gets written, and the way good software teams operate. So first of all senior software engineering teams do not work in my experience. It just like, it's too, you need a mix, you need a blend of skill levels, right? The team really gels when there's somebody who, hey, go work on this simpler problem, come back and, report back on it versus a bunch of senior engineers. Everybody wants to work on the hardest, most glorious problem. Nobody wants to do any of the chores or clean up any of the code or work on any of the flapping tests or any of that stuff, right? So like you're failing in just like basic team composition. And I also think it's just a misunderstanding of what the LLM is doing, right? It's mostly writing code that matches patterns that it's seen in all the code that it's, read that's out there. But it also means it's making mistakes all the time, or it's not understanding internal architecture of your application, or it's misdesigning some approach, to some, problem that you had. And that's you can't just delegate. This idea that people, oh, I'm just delegating 5 coding agents and they're writing everything for me. It's like, okay, that may work today and tomorrow, but like talk to me on Wednesday. Well, all that, AI generated code is working together.
Yeah, I mean, there are use cases where you actually, for example, payment integration or billing or, there's stuff to go around for junior engineers. I don't think we're there yet where there's nothing to do. And egos, like if you have too many seniors, you have
Totally.
too
Too many
many.
ego. For sure. I think, I think, so you bring up a good point, which is there is a fair amount of glue code that everybody needs to write for various different purposes. And the
Right.
AIs have very, very effectively brought the cost of that kind of glue code almost like close to zero, right? And so if you can be very discerning about, oh yeah, I need this thing, it's going to live off here in this module, I'm going to call a function, it's going to do its thing, and then it's like, great, yeah, let the AI go write that, and who cares what's in there as long as it works. But I think it takes a lot of human expertise and oversight to know when are those cases. And I see it with Cursor or Claude Code all the time, where I ask it, hey, go look at some issue or, suggest some improvement to the thing. And suddenly the LM's off, like, refactoring stuff and changing the assumptions about how a bunch of code works. And you're like, whoa, hold on. Don't stop doing that. So like these tools, I think there's just a fundamental misunderstanding people have that comes from this very simple fact, which is LLMs are really good at mimicking human intelligence. And we humans want to believe they are intelligent because humans love to anthropomorphize things, right? We love to imagine how much our dogs love us, and they're waiting for us to get home, when the truth is the dog's knows that you are where the food comes from. That's what it's. So humans just have this innate desire to want to anthropomorphize things, right? So when ChatGPT comes back with some seemingly intelligent answer, we really want to imbue it with this intelligence. We want to believe that it has this intelligence, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't understand. It's not reflecting on the answers it's giving or putting them in the context of the broader human experience or whatever, right? It's not actually doing those things. So I think we misunderstand how intelligent, the LLM is, at the same time that we often underestimate its capabilities. These models are also incredibly powerful. They really can do some amazing things, but they are amazing tools in the hands of intelligent humans that are using them. And they're not just off solving problems by themselves. And I think a lot of people in industry, a lot of people as they're trying to adopt AI technology are kind of falling into this trap, right? Where they see some demo and they're like, wow, look how amazing this thing is. Great. Let's give it all of outbound sales. Let's just turn up outbound sales to the machine. We don't have to hire these kids anymore. This is great, right? And it's no, that outbound sales job. So I have a kid who does outbound sales at a startup right now. And I'm no, that outbound sales job is a lot harder, more complex, and more nuanced than you have any appreciation for, because you're not actually doing that job. And the LLM is not up to that task, but it is a very powerful tool to give all of your, human employees.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's there yet. I mean, the AI sales folks want to push that agenda. And I think some people do believe or have started believing it. But especially in engineering, I think people who've used these models extensively to build software, it comes across in maybe week 2 of dealing with these. And so as you're building any early stage product, you have founding team intuition and um, team input and customer feedback. How do you balance that? And I remember coming across your post around reluctance to build seat map as a feature. Do you want to talk about how do you balance building
Yeah,
what's already
sure.
out there versus
Yeah.
innovating
Yeah.
on the front?
Yeah, I think it's, it's such a funny story, right? The story was basically that my team was talking to one of our early customers, and the early customer was like, hey, we need a seat map because we need people need to pick their seats on their flights. And I'm just I'm not a super advanced traveler, right? When I book a flight, I want an aisle seat that's as close to the front of the plane as I can get. And that is my search algorithm to find the seat. And I was like, well, why do we even need this? I can just ask the agent, hey, find me an aisle seat near the front of the plane, and the agent will go and book it. And the team came back there no, but our customer really wants this seat map, this graphical display, of the plane. And I'm like, okay, whatever. What a waste of time. Why are we building this, stupid thing? But what they understood, which our customers understood, is that real road warrior travelers, they know the planes that they travel on, and they know how they're configured, and they know which seat they want to ride in. Sometimes they know a single specific seat, and they want to choose the flight based on whether they can get that seat, because for reasons they just know, those routes. And so the insight was just that is really important to a certain very important set of travelers, right? These are also people that travel a lot. So these are going to be the power users of our system.
Right.
And frankly, those, who wants to pick a seat by telling the AI agent what, find me aisle 12, whatever,
Yeah.
that's not going to work. You want to see it on a map. We humans are visual, learners, right? So that was sort of just the insight, was just that, no, we need this feature. Yeah, it's not going to be super agentic AI particularly, but in terms of building a good travel application, this is just a critical feature. And the fact that it's not differentiated from kind of the 50 other seat maps that are available as part of people's products out there doesn't sort of matter to our customers. Like they still want it. And it's just code. It's just one feature, like whatever. You build it and then it's done mostly.
Yeah.
And so the team really advocated. They were like, no, we really need to build this feature. And then they really built it. Like they built it really, really well. And at the end, I was like, wow, this was pretty cool. And our customer loved it. And they were like, oh, this is great. Like, this looks really good. Like, yeah, we can really, like, this is exactly, what we wanted. And so I had a bunch of takeaways from that. One is don't trust my intuition because I don't know what every traveler wants. Every traveler is different. And I did know that going in, and it's still something that I very much believe. And it's part of the premise of how BizTrip is trying to apply AI to travel is the personalization, right? The idea that for not a lot of cost, we can make an intelligent agent that is able to respond to possessions. What is your preference when you're traveling? How does that differ from my preference? How does that differ from the next person, right? We can make a, personalized thing. So I knew that every traveler was different, but I think just appreciating that sometimes you got to build a feature that your customers want, and you can't worry about whether you think it's a good feature or important or whatever. And even more so, what I really learned was trust my team. Like they are living and breathing this problem. They're talking to our customers every day, every week. And if they believe that it's important, there's like 99% chance, that they're right. And I need to let them go.
Yeah. I mean, founders do need to have intuition, but at the same time, you need to probably figure out which ones are the hills you want to die on versus ones that you would faster experiment and probably get to a better decision.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think there's that classic product manager thing, right? Of,
Yeah.
hey, let's not build, faster horses, right? Faster horse and buggies, we're actually going to build cars. But I think, yeah, once you kind of get past that basic sort of vision of what you're, trying to do, then any really successful product has to suffer against real world users and improve based on that, that feedback. And that's the most important thing you're doing as a startup, right? Is learning what your customers really want, what the market really wants. And so, yeah, it's always a fun balance as a founder to both, on the one hand, be, oh, I'm so visionary, I'm going to show people the future and the path out there. And at the same time, be like, well, oh, wait, what was that? Oh, you wanted that thing and you don't like this other thing? Okay, let's.
Yeah. 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 And so, where do you see AI having the biggest impact given the recent experiments you've had so far in the travel industry in the next 5 years?
First of all, 5 years is a long time.
Yeah,
Long
especially
time
now.
nowadays, a lot of changes. Yeah, in 3 months in the industry now. So I would be hard pressed to make too much of a prognostication going out that far. I do think that the way I think of kind of travel and travel tech circa, today or last year, is most of the systems that we built are these systems of record for travel. They're
Yeah.
basically they're basically like accounting systems, right? They're just like, here's my flight, here's my hotel, here's my car rental, and this thing's just going to store that record and it's going to store the confirmation ID for me. But it's very functional. When I want to change it, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fiddle some bits, or maybe I'm going to call somebody on the phone and they're going to go fiddle some bits to get the record changed. But everything is kind of like that. Everything is like you're dealing with accounting entries to make any sort of changes. I think AI now offers this opportunity for travel tech to really move up the stack, where for the first time we will have applications that can really think about travel in the way that we humans think about it, right? Which is why are you going on this trip? What is the context for this trip? Is this just you going to visit a customer, or is it you're going with a team to a conference, right? Those are very different contexts with different kind of requirements, in terms of the travel you're doing, right? What kind of industry are you in? Is it international travel or a domestic trip? All these kinds of differences. So I think for the first time, really, we will have the ability to build these systems that are sensitive to all of that context and all those nuances, and will be able to build applications that are so much smarter and actually helping me offload a lot of that planning, right? Like, I'm busy. I've got a million things going on, and I know the Focusrite conference is coming up sometime in the third week of November, this upcoming month. But I'm going with 2 colleagues from, the office here, and everybody's got to like plan flights, and we got to set up customer meetings, and we need hotel bookings and conference passes and all this stuff. And I have to keep all of that in my head, right? The current systems are just going to help me get a flight. But I think now we're going to start to see the ability to build these much smarter systems where I can just go into BizTrip and be like, hey, I got to go to Focusrite next month. Tom's going to find out when his flights are getting in, what hotel he's staying at, book me on flights that show up around the same time, and get me a room at the same hotel. And by the way, when I'm down there, I got to visit Joe from this partner company, find a good couple dinner recommendations for me and send them to me via email. We're really going to have that level of kind of assistant, almost human-like, level of assistant, and really be able to offload a lot of these kind of planning minutia details. Because what's funny with corporate travel, right, is that the travel is not your job. Your job is something else. The travel is just like facilitating you to go and do this job. So all the time that you spend traveling en route, planning for where you're going, managing your hotel reservation, all that is like basically wasted time, or it's like falling on me as like an individual, or it's just taking away from the time for me to do my job. And so the more that the system can help offload more and more of that, time, just means I'm going to be more effective at the actual job that someone's paying me to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an interesting way to look at it. A lot of industries have traditionally been system of record in terms of the software they use, and that plane is shifting massively.
Yeah. I mean, they're tools. They're primitive tools that we've
Mhm.
given people, and they're better than writing it down in a notepad and losing, the notes that you took, right? But I really think, yeah, with kind of the rise of agentic systems and LLMs that can process and reason about so much data in such a sophisticated way, I really think we're going to look back on these kind of like primitive bookkeeping, kind of tools and be sort of like, oh my God, I can't believe that we made people manage all of this complex kind of work activity and process via these very, very primitive tools.
And so are you guys already doing the end-to-end transaction completely, or through agents, or is there like a review phase, and or there's both, and what's the customer appetite? Are they completely happy with, an agent moving money?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's funny because when we built the first version of the agent, so primarily right now we've been focused on travel planning. And so we
Right.
have a travel planning agent, which is kind of the core of the product. We are building additional agents. So we will have agents for managing your trip when you're on trip, or agents for helping you manage changes to your itinerary. And so, but when we built this first planning agent, I was like, oh yeah, no, the agent can't book your trip. There's got to be a button. There's a button where you click and it shows you what you're spending, and the user has to like confirm this is what they want to do. And I did that very intentionally, right? Because I was like, yeah, we shouldn't be let the agent deciding that it's spending your money and you're not like in control, of what's happening. We're not going to earn people's trust that way. Well, what we found out was literally in very early user testing, the agent flow, as you kind of get through selecting flights and hotels and car, at the end, it's like, okay, hey, your trip is ready to book. And people would be like, great, book it. They just type it into the prompt. Like, hey, agent, go book my trip. We just had a conversation. I just told you exactly, what I want. I know what's in there. And then the agent would be like, oh, yeah, you have to click the book button over there. Like, I can't book the trip for you. And so we just saw immediately that like, oh, no, there's not really a problem. And then so we just rebuilt it. We just said, okay, the agent's just going to book it. It's just going to call like the functions. I think I was worried like, oh, it's going to call it like at the wrong time or whatever. But that doesn't happen. And we have
Hmm.
guardrails in there so that we don't like try to book a trip that's in the middle of, not all the pieces have been, selected or whatever. And actually for the user, it wasn't a problem. They were just like, no, I can see what's there. Like we have an itinerary. We're showing you real time as you're building it in conversation with the agent. So there's no surprise at the end. So anyway, that was just like a funny example to me of where like we were like realized, this thing, but actually by the time you're done with the conversation and it's answered all your questions and you said, oh wait, no, I want a later flight back on United instead of Delta, and the agent tells you, oh, okay, well, there's one that leaves at 4:30, but that's the latest flight on Delta. If you want to come back later, you're gonna have to fly. Once you've sort of had that intelligent conversation with it, booking the trip is really not a problem.
Right. Interesting. In your case, if a team is traveling consistently and you have a lot of historical data, I think the accuracy goes up. So I think there's a balance between trusting a random frontier model with very little context to something like you are building, which has a lot of contextual information already baked in. Maybe,
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of implicit guardrails in having all this historical data and this user preference data for sure. Yeah. If it was, and that's something that's like a trade-off that we kind of talk about and experience a lot with the agent where, sometimes my customer will say, well, hey, I did this search, but it came back with like 6 different flights, and I thought it was supposed to make like a smart recommendation. And I'll say, well, does it know when you want to fly or like what airline you want to fly at? Like your profile is empty. There's no historical traveler data for you for this particular destination. What is the basis on which the agent is supposed to make an intelligent recommendation? Like it could guess, but we designed it not to guess. We designed it to use hard data and hard information, hard preference to make good recommendations. And that if it doesn't have that, then it either asks you clarifying questions or it gives you more options to choose from and tries to learn from your revealed preferences, right? As you use the system, over time. But I think you're exactly right that like there's when the problem is unconstrained and there's not a lot of context or guardrails, then it's like, yeah, the default mode of the LLM is to kind of pick an answer, YOLO. And if you don't understand that that's what it's doing, you may end up with some kind of, random thing.
All right. We've reached never get a cold email, which is a section that helps hopefully listeners get to know you better. And if they are trying to reach you, the email will not be cold.
Oh, nice.
What's been the most memorable failure? You've been at you've had a long career, and I think this is not your first startup, right? If I remember
No,
correctly.
this is like my 4th or 5th. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done a bunch of startups.
And
Yeah.
so what's been the most memorable failure for you so far?
I've had some good memorable failures along the way for sure. And I don't think, it's hard to be in the startup game and not have some, not have some failures. It kind of comes with the territory. In the aughts, I was part of a company. We were trying to do a consumer video product. This was like the early days, kind of like after YouTube had launched, and YouTube had sort of grabbed kind of like basic sort of video watching and video distribution. But we were like excited about video. We're like, oh, there's got to be some other product, angle, around video as this kind of new media type on the internet. And I spent a few years at a startup where we built a bunch of different products that nobody used. And we were like very much too in love with our own product and not in love enough with like our customers and what they wanted to solve. And so, I think at some point we had 5,000 active users a week of this product that we built. And I was talking with the CEO and I'm like, and he's like, is it great? We're up to 5,000 users a week. I'm like, yeah, but we need to be at like 10 million users a week. Like 5,000 users for a consumer product is nobody, basically. It's like your friends on LinkedIn, And so so I learned a bunch of things in that failure. One was consumer is hard. Consumer's really hard. It's a hits business, unless you figure out a way to have a bunch of, at bats, it can be pretty hard to like count on, hitting it exactly right. And I think the other thing I learned was just, it's the old saw, right? Of you got to be in love with the problem and not, the solution, or not, the product, that you're building. And so I think that's something that I've tried to learn and internalize. It's hard as a technologist, right? You kind of pour your blood, sweat, and tears into building these applications and these systems. But I'm lucky enough to have kind of had a long enough career that I built stuff that lasted. I built a lot of stuff that got thrown away. Everything gets thrown away eventually. And so you kind of got to appreciate the process and solving somebody's problem today, and maybe you're not the solution tomorrow, and but that's okay.
Yeah, dead code is part of an engineer's life. You write a lot of dead code, either
Yeah.
intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think B2C is definitely hard. That was a good point about it being a hits a game. I think if you don't have inherent virality, yeah, it's a uphill battle for sure. How has your approach to building and leading tech teams evolved over the years? You said you're still hiring junior engineers. Given the experience with multiple startups, what would you recommend, and what have been the learnings for managing
Yeah.
teams?
I think the thing that I did maybe earlier, sort of middle of my career when I was leading teams, I think I used to be much more prescriptive with my teams. I think I was like, hey, I have a lot of experience. I've been around the game, and I think I know how these problems should be solved. And I think I conceptualized like my job as an engineering leader to like teach or convince the team how to solve the problems in what I thought was the right way. That's sort of what, I sort of envision my role as this like prescriptive, kind of top down thing. And I think as I've gone further in my career, what I've really learned is that really doesn't work in the long term, because there's lots of different ways to solve problems and to approach problems. And different people on your team have different skills and different strengths, and they will come at problems in different ways than you will. And so in the short term, that prescriptive thing may work because you have the plan and okay, everybody executes your plan. But long term, it's not working because your people are not as invested in the thing that they're building. So nowadays, I really try to trust the team more and to allow people to come up with their own approach to the solution and to own it. And I'm like, okay, that's how you want to do it. Great. Let's build it that way. We'll try it out. If it doesn't work, we'll fix it later, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be the way that I necessarily think it should be done either. And I think that just builds a stronger team. You're building trust. Your people are more invested because they're coming in with their own ideas. And if you let somebody go and execute on their own idea to how to solve a problem, man, they are committed to it. They are committed to solving that problem, right? Because that was their inspiration to solve it that way. And so I think I've learned that on balance, way better trade-off to trust your people, trust them to, sometimes they're going to make mistakes. Sometimes they'll build things in a way that you don't think is like the right way to build them, but that over, longer term, you get a much stronger team and a better result that way.
Yeah, when dealing with people, you have to be patient. And I think when you're impatient is when you go into this prescriptive mode. And over time, I think everybody starts that way. They start like you did probably, where when you get thrust into from becoming a software engineer to managing people, you start being prescriptive, and then you realize that you need to be patient and it needs to be their idea. As I saw this Instagram video the other day on this dad was teaching the kid how to hit a baseball, and this influencer was talking over it, and she spoke about self-evaluation, let the kid self-evaluate instead of, and I think that's what is needed in management as well. You need to be a little patient and kind of let them figure it out, and they'll fail. People will fail.
Yeah. The durable lesson that all good managers, eventually learn is that, letting people do it themselves and learn by the failure just teaches them much better than if I just try to tell them.
And so looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self if, whoever starting out at tech, you started as an engineer and now you've had this founding journey, new engineering grads, any advice you would give them?
Yeah, I think what I try to tell kind of especially the younger engineers that I work with, is make sure to go spend time with people outside the engineering team, right? The people doing sales and marketing, obviously the product managers, but the people doing customer support, all of those are critical functions, and you just learn so much from those. You will learn so much from those people, and building that social muscle and that, kind of network, is something that I did not do well early in my career. It took me years to really branch out beyond just like kind of focusing on the code, and the engineering. And I think, yeah, that like, yeah, his career will benefit and be a better career, if you kind of don't let yourself get siloed in your kind of functional area, too soon, that you make sure you spend time with people that are doing other jobs and other functions, and really, really try to understand what those people do. And it's such a, I mean, it's almost a cliche. But one of my favorite quotes about AI this is a few years ago. Somebody online was like, yeah, everybody thinks AI is going to replace somebody else's job. And I just thought it's such a brilliant insight, right? That it's like, yeah, we all think everybody else's job is some easy thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, must not be that hard to like be a dentist or whatever. You just come in, you poke around at people's teeth, and you kind of like clean a thing, but that's just like human nature. Like when you actually have the job, you understand the difficulty of it and all the nuance and the complexity of it. And you just don't understand it for the jobs that you don't have. So that's sort of my advice to people, is like really go and talk to people, network with people, understand all the different jobs, that people are doing out there, so that you can kind of avoid that mistake of thinking like, that person's job must be easy. Like, look how simple it is.
I think if it also helps you understand the domain a little better as a whole, if you're gaining experience,
Absolutely.
as an
Absolutely.
engineer.
That's the whole thing, is you don't really understand any domain until you kind of really understand all the people who are doing all the different particular jobs, within that domain. I think there's some really good companies, right, that will do like rotations, right? They'll take somebody from engineering and put them in customer support, right? Or whatever. Somebody from marketing comes and does a rotation in, product management, that kind of thing. And I think that's a really powerful tool that probably companies don't use as much as they should,
Yeah.
because people like to specialize. It's just human nature that like, you like being good at something. And once you invest time in learning how to do it, you kind of feel incentivized to kind of stick in that specialty and be the specialized person doing that. But a lot of times when you go into companies, you'll find a lot of the top performers are the people that like moved divisions, right? They started, I worked at this ad tech company, and we had somebody who joined engineering from the media team. He was on the team that helped design media campaigns and was like working with customers for the first couple years. And then he learned programming and moved into engineering. And man, he was great, because his understanding of the business was just at a different level than everybody else in engineering, who just had this kind of surface level understanding of like, what is the product that we're building? How do our customers actually use it? And this person had just spent so much time with customers, understanding the job they were trying to do. And then he was able to bring that knowledge back into engineering.
Yeah. A lot of people are demanding for 4-day work week. I think it should still be 5-day, but you can have 1 day as a rotation day. That will
Yeah.
solve both problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. That's a great approach, I think. Yeah. And give you a chance to, it's great to try to do somebody else's job and to learn,
And so, I think we kind of answered this question, but maybe if you want to tackle this last bit, which is how much have things changed from your Stripe days? I saw an article by someone where Stripe now has 500 positions which start with the title head off. So there's definitely this change of big companies struggling with attracting talent. But in terms of your experience, what has radically changed from how you did things at Stripe versus how you've built your companies?
Yeah, I don't know if I can sort of generalize experience, right? It's like every company's different, every startup's different. That's kind of what makes it interesting and exciting, makes it challenging. I think one of the things that's probably hard for people who are thinking about doing a startup or want to do a startup is you can't learn that much from the people that did it before because all the starting conditions are different for everybody, right? The market's different and the team is different. Technology is constantly different and upgrading and changing. And so it's just really hard. The Airbnb guys, they sold, joke cereal to get bootstrapped in the early days. Well, maybe we could do that at BizTrip. We hand out joke cereal. Like, I just don't think it works, So you can try to take these sort of durable or adaptable lessons, get out of the building, talk to customers, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I think that, there's some good, durable, wisdom to be learned and to be taken. I would say the biggest thing that I learned at Stripe, and I think is absolutely will be forever durable lesson about building companies. Stripe had a culture that was basically every person at Stripe is the best person to ever do that job. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's like the people cooking lunch in the kitchen or outfitting the building and the bathrooms, right? All the way to everybody in finance. Like that's just the bar at Stripe is we only hire like literally the best person that's ever done this job. Now you can't do that, obviously, but that was sort of like the aspiration. And what it meant was everybody you worked with was just at this incredible level. And to that point of like the people in different jobs, right? I would go work with, I have to work with the accounting team because we need to work on some random accounting project. You'd spend a day with somebody and be like, wow, that person like really knows their job and their domain. And so I think it's easy when you're doing a startup to think, we got to build great software, so we're hiring great developers, right? Or we're building a consumer application, we got to hire like great designers. But, whatever, then, the accountant can be whatever, Joe from, Joe's buddy, who does accounting. and I think the mistake there is just to not appreciate that all the jobs matter, right? And they all kind of contribute overall, to the company. So I think if there was one like big lesson I really took away from Stripe, it was that idea of like, ideally everybody should be great at their job, every single job, every person you hire for. And to the Stripe, the founders' credit, like I think that was how they thought about it. Like they sweated over every early hire and like, is this person going to be really great, at the job we're putting them into?
Yeah. And maybe with AI, I think it gives some leeway to founders to be a little patient with hiring. Because it's like if you start early enough to build a team, you're probably not under so much pressure to kind of like I remember back in the day when building something, you really needed people to move fast, and you just couldn't move faster with a tiny team. But today you can, which means you can be a little patient with hiring.
Yeah, no, that's right. There's so much leverage you can get from modern tools. You can really build a lot. And of course, you move faster with a smaller team. The
Yeah.
smaller, the longer you can stay that smaller group, the faster, you can execute. And adding people, you need people to get work done for sure. But adding people just always adds coordination cost that is hard to avoid.
All right. We've reached the end. Are you hiring? Are you raising any announcements you want to make? How can people reach you?
Yeah, cool. So people are welcome. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me, scottp@biztrip, .ai anytime. I'd love to hear from people. We are hiring. We're hiring in the development team right now. We are Not currently raising funds, but probably soon we'll be looking to raise a new round of funding. So that's coming up soon, but I don't have any immediate announcements.
Well, Scott, thanks for taking the time. It was a pleasure chatting.
Cool. Thanks for the session. This was really fun.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.